Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. And every once in a while, I send you a brief missive, a little dispatch from here on the farm on Insilkshin-speaking territory, not too far away from a small town known as Summerland, BC. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola. This episode is a dispatch from me doing horse chores in the morning. Just some of the thoughts I have as I'm out here with these guys. I've been thinking so much about AI and the male violence epidemic, lack of empathy, the rise of fascism, and realizing that while yes, I did have some good role models growing up, I also had a lot of tough stuff. I had a lot of trauma, as many people do. I think even more people potentially today than ever before have just a constant low-grade trauma response that makes us less available for empathy with others. But I had some good things happen when I was a kid. If you know about the ACE studies, the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies, you also know, potentially, hopefully you also know about the protective experiences, the PACEs, meaning that, yeah, you can have a lot of bad stuff happen to you, but if you have a few good things happen to you, it can really course correct. And so some of the things that happened to me that were really good was I had adults who singled me out, or I had singular opportunities to learn empathy when it wasn't just sort of naturally available to me easily in the environment in which I was growing up. So in the 6th grade, I was chosen along with 8 or 10 kids, maybe a dozen, to be a peer counselor. And the school counselor, Mr. Cole, I remember, it was 1985. So we were allowed to go to this teacher, the school counselor's house for supper. All of us, our parents dropped us off. And they had this really nice house out in Maple Bay overlooking the water with like a sunken living room. And all of us kids played games. And I don't really remember many details about it, but it was like, you've been chosen to be school peer counselors in the 6th grade. So the younger kids, or even your peers in your own grade, will know that you are someone they can go to talk to. And so they talked to us about, being kind, watching for kids who weren't playing with anyone at recess and inviting them to be part of the games, what to say or do if we saw someone bullying, who to go to, that sort of thing. By the time I was in the 11th grade, 12th grade, I was chosen to be a school prefect, which was, it's kind of like a blend between school counselors and school cops in a way. And so one of the first things they did is they had us have another kind of little retreat and talk to some of the elder teachers, like real elders, like they were probably mid-70s still teaching. And Mr. Graham Anderson took the 12 of us or so aside. And the first thing he did was teach us about 10 qualities of leadership, starting with integrity, honesty, fairness, compassion, moving on down this list. It was pretty good. We had a big emphasis on citizenship in our school, as well as academics and athletics and enrichment activities. Citizenship was a really big deal. And then in my 20s, one of my closest friends completed suicide. And the therapist that I spoke to when I was feeling suicidal myself in the aftermath of that and a few other things, he said, I don't think you want to be a Saturday night special. By that he meant somebody who's in the emergency room with bleeding wrists, I guess. And he said, I recommend you call this crisis line and ask them about volunteering. And so I did. It was called the Need Crisis Line. and it was the suicide crisis line. But of course, people can call for anything, not just because they're feeling suicidal. But the best thing about that was we had 100-hour training just in empathic listening. And what they meant by that was linking content with a feeling. And so we spent 100 hours doing like role play of people calling and not really using emotional language, just calling. Like, a lot of their calls were elderly people living alone. And so they would call and be lonely. And lots of people would call for the resources, which would be like, I'm interested in finding out about, it could be anything from like supports for my kid who's getting in trouble at school to I would like some weight loss stuff, or I would like I need to find a dietitian or a nutritionist because I have diabetes, or whatever. And we had big, huge binders. This was like the 90s, right? We didn't have a computer database. We had huge binders that were alphabetical. And we would just talk to people and ask them, it sounds like you're feeling lonely. Or we would say, I imagine that must be really stressful having a son who's struggling in school. I'm guessing you feel helpless. And maybe they would take you up on talking about their feelings of helplessness, and you would just spend that time listening to like, what's the content and what might you imagine they were feeling. And so all of this to say, these were things that had to be taught to me, and I needed to practice them. Somebody had to sit me down just like any kind of class in school and explain, this is an emotion that often coincides with these kinds of events. Here's some synonyms for it. Here's how you might float that with someone. This is how you empathize. And I really think if 2026 is going to be the year of analog, if we want to shift people away from using ChatGPT as a therapist, if we want to address the male violence epidemic, we have to teach people. And not just young people, we have to teach adults how to link content with emotion, how to have emotional literacy, how to sit with and process emotions. These are things that were taught to me, not from books, but from people. Of all the trainings I've ever done for therapeutic interventions, the best ever was my volunteer crisis line training in linking emotion with content. So maybe that's something you do or think about doing. It's volunteering with your local crisis line. Maybe you have some time for that. Maybe you already have those skills and you have a little class for your neighborhood. Maybe you have a skill share in your co-op. Maybe you make a little booklet or a one-pager that you put on your fridge. I just really think, though, it needs to go beyond the family. And it needs to be an intergenerational gift that we do, is teach people emotional literacy, but also give people chances to practice. And, maybe it's not the crisis line. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the Immigrant and Refugee Association. Maybe it's your senior center. And listen, I get it. Who has time to volunteer? That might be a very small, narrow slice of the population who has time for that. But if it's at all within your purview to be able to offer very basic contact nutrition, very basic psychoeducation, and then a chance to practice and have conversation, it's absolutely invaluable. I'm so lucky I had that kind of instruction at such a young age, and then repeated again as a teenager, and then again as a young adult. That is the training that I rely on still, and the one that I don't know we can get anywhere without. My best friend in high school, she went to Waldorf school for elementary. So like her family would talk like that, they were really kind and gentle with each other. and they would say, when you say this, I feel that. They would say, oh, it sounds like you're really worried about stuff. They would just like use emotionally responsive and attuned language. I didn't grow up like that. So if you are a natural, if you come from a securely attached family, if you don't have to work hard to attune and connect with your feelings and articulate them, good for you. You could maybe help the rest of us. But even if you're somebody like me who had to like work at it, like if it's within your scope and you have time and you can arrange a little psychoeducation, a little class, a little listening trade, whatever it is, have your wheel of emotions there, talk about emotions, try to use them in a sentence, try to guess what people are thinking. If you can do that, you should do that. That would be world building and culture making. Really generous of you, and it could absolutely change a life. Absolutely.
To learn more about contact nutrition, join us in the Numinous Network. It's like a cross between the library and the YMCA. There are on-demand courses as well as 5 to 10 live events every week that you can just drop into to experience some contact nutrition for yourself. A little goes a long way. Learn about the Numinous Network at carmenspanyola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time.